I'd like to call to order the August 24th Port Orchard City Council regular meeting. Please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we are to the approval of the agenda. Mr. Diener, did your question get answered at the meeting?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure that was on a consent agenda item. All right, is there any additions or subtractions to tonight's agenda or modifications?
Mayor? Yes. I just wanted to note that the county has signed the interlocal agreement, and so a signed copy is on the dais. It had a few, we had requested some editorial changes that were not substantive, and the attorney has reviewed both their draft and our draft, and they had already approved theirs, and so we are going back to the original version that they sent us.
Okay, and Councilmember Diener's question is what before you here tonight. These forms are blank, and they're supposed to be. These are the templates that we'll use when we go to do things with the county. So they're examples of what we're going to use for a form. So,
I don't necessarily want to take this off the consent agenda, but I would like Nick to talk about the progress in this work with the county when it's director's reports.
okay, sounds good. Sure, I'll make note of that. So, with that, is there a motion?
Mayor, I'd move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented. I don't, is Mr. Clausen's excusal?
Yes.
Yes, there it is. All right.
Yes.
It is on there. So we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? The agenda has been approved. We're to citizen comments. Jerry? Okay. Seeing none. We'll move on to our consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay.
Second?
A motion, a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the consent agenda has been approved. We are to our presentation. Crocker, you have a presentation on the biennial budget status update. Maybe if you could, yeah, there you go. Dim those lights. Well, Noah's bringing that up. One thing Chief and I talked about earlier today, I don't know if there's been any progress, but the school board hadn't met either to approve our agreement for the school resource officer, but we don't meet again before school starts, so I thought it was appropriate, have you guys approve it. We don't think it'll get modified, but if it does, then we'll bring it back.
Any different from years past?
It is not. Small
The only
increase.
difference is the compensation to the police department for the personnel is a small increase. That's it. Nothing.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Crocker.
All right. Greetings, Mayor and council members. So how many of you recall the last time I was before you with the presentation on PowerPoint? We covered 2017 as a biennial budget status update. So we're going to review kind of where we are at year to date through our biennial budget and how are we performing. Again, I think it's important.
Colors? Any colors?
I'm continually work on my colors, so I hope they are acceptable to everybody. We ran the numbers through August, so keep in mind the percentage of 82% as we kind of walk through here as a kind of a benchmark to see how we're performing. Again, we're going to cover the major operational funds, our general fund, our street fund, water sewer fund, storm drainage fund, and then finally we'll review our capital budget projects. So our first fund is our general fund, or we also sometimes call it the current expense fund. Year to date, the city has collected 85% of its biennial budget, which is really good. Again, if you keep in mind the 82% kind of where we're at. Year to date, the city has spent 74% of our biennial budget. Again, positive that we're under kind of our 82%. So for the general fund and current expense, I would say we are on track for our biennial budget. We broke down the current expense fund by department, just again to understand and evaluate how each department is performing. Again, each department is under the 82%, so everyone's kind of within their budget authority, leaving them some capacity for the remaining months to finish up those things they need to do in the department. So all real positive signs on the expense side and the revenue side for current expense. In the city street fund, year to date, we've collected 78%. So it's on the other side of that 82, but again, not bad. Where we get some little pickup is that year to date, we've only spent 67% of what we budgeted. So again, with the combination, we're on track. We have a positive budget from the city's perspective for the city street fund. Now the water sewer fund, again, if you recall, the way the fund is currently budgeted, we have our water sewer operations and capital all in one fund. And we've discussed this at previous meetings that the council has a desire to split those up into water funds and sewer funds, operational and capital. So we are going to be doing that this budgeting cycle. And so it's going to look different going forward. But what we could put together is what the water and sewer together operationally looks like. And we were able to remove the capital for this presentation. So when we look at the water sewer fund combined, again, 87% on track of its biennial budget. Year to date, below that 82%, 73% spent. So far, everything positive sign for water sewer as well. Storm drainage is the lucky winner that actually hit the 82% mark on revenues. And year to date, the city can spend, fill in the blank, 67% on expenses. So again, positive signs for all our major operational funds. Now, I just want to pause on that before we go forward to the capital in case there's any questions on the operational side. At this point where we're at in August, everything's real positive, and that's good as we move into the budget season for 2019-2020.
Can you remind me what the contributions to the street funds include or come from?
Yeah, we have a property tax that has been allocated to the street fund as well as gas tax dollars that goes directly into the street fund. And we also have TBD dollars that go into the street fund as well.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Yep. So Noah, we're doing really well, obviously, on expenditures and revenues. Is there something on expenditures that hasn't been spent that would account for that, or is just we're doing really well managing our expenses?
I think department heads are doing really well, and what we do at this time of the year, as we're preparing for the 1920 budget, we kind of touch base with them and ask that question. Okay, what do you have anything coming up that we need to be aware of? You guys are on track expenditure-wise. Is there anything that we need to be planning for? So that's what we're going to be doing at this time, conducting with the department heads, asking those very good questions, because it all looks good to us. But for as much as we talk, they usually share if there's anything major coming up. So I think for the most part, we're in good shape. But we will do that touch with them as we're trying to project and forecast out the remainder of the year. Where do we think we really will end as we move into 2019-2020?
So there's no, to your knowledge, there's no project that didn't get done or hiring that didn't get done that would show a...
Not on the
about-
operational side.
not
Now we'll
operational.
come to the capital side, which is,
Different story.
kind of a different story.
Yeah.
But that's really on the operational side, salaries, benefits, kind of everyday stuff.
That's a great job.
We do have an engineering position
Right.
we're trying to hire, but that was gonna require a budget amendment, so it's not reflected in our expenses because it wasn't budgeted for.
No, but all the funds are looking really good. Thank you.
Yeah. So now we get to move on to the capital program. Again, what you'll see this year is we're trying to lay out the capital budget a little bit differently than we have in the years past, make it a little more clear. That's not going to reflect in this presentation, but you'll start to see the same kind of repetition of how I display the information. We're going to have water, sewer, storm, parks and facilities, and transportation projects separately identified so we can track the capital budget throughout our next biennial period. But this presentation is meant to reflect on kind of the 17-18 budget. So when we take a look at the water capital projects, for the most part, we haven't seen a whole lot of activity as far as expenses have been paid out or incurred yet. However, well 9 is starting to get underway, and well 13 is starting to get underway. So over the next few months, those are the two categories I would expect to see some expenditures actually using their budget authority and seeing some work done. Again, what we'd like to do this time of year is touch base with the Public Works Department and Planning Department on these capital projects and kind of get a feel for where these projects will be throughout the remainder of the year, so we know going into 2019 and 2020 how much of additional or recurring capital authority we would need to be in the next biennial period. So the sewer projects, very similar, not a whole lot of activity, except for on the Tremont sewer improvements. You'll notice that we have fully used all our budget authority, and in fact, we're actually over our expenditure authority by $1,647. So we'll talk more Tremont throughout this whole capital presentation, but I would expect there to be further sewer expenses coming through Tremont, which will require a budget amendment in the next month or so. We have McCormick Sewer Pump Station design work for number 2. Again, that's going on right now, so we expect further expenses coming over the next couple months for those 2 projects. Marina Pump Station, again, the reason it's so negative there is because we currently do not have budget authority for it. We have incurred some very small, less than $1,000 of expenses for that project. So again, when I bring forward budget amendments in September, that will be one project that I'll be requesting some budget authority for. And that'll be a big project for our 2019 and 2020 budget as well. You can see here on the storm water projects, Tremont Storm has a little bit of capacity still, $277,000, and I believe we expect that to be fully expended by the end of the year. Parks and facilities. McCormick Park Phase 2 construction. We have about $732,000 of budget authority still left. The project is underway and moving quite well. So again, that's a project we expect to close up this year. We've already talked about the 720 Prospect building. That one is completed. And the Rockwell Park and Design Construction Project is another one of those projects that we do not currently have budget authority for, and that's why you see it in the negative. And so I'll bring forward that in a budget amendment in September. Again, with that project, we have grant funds and local match as a part of that project. Now we come to transportation. We see lots of activity going on in the transportation capital projects, which is a good sign. It means we're doing lots of transportation-related work. Bay Street pedestrian path segment number 3. Old Clifton is actually over its budget by about $12,000. So again, another project we'll come back to. Tremont widening has about $8 million of additional authority for transportation-related activity with that project. And other Bay Street projects are nearing their completion. So lots of activity on the transportation front, which is a good sign. Because when we looked at the water, not much activity, sewer, not much activity. So you can start to see where our focus has been for this period. It's really been on transportation, which is where it should be with this big Tremont project. Year to date, we're 53% through our project costs, so 47% of our budget authorities still remains. We've completed roughly 60% of the project timeline with about 40% still to go. So those are all positive signs as of today for the Tremont project. And with that, that concludes kind of the operational review, the capital review, and I'll be before you guys over the next couple months talking budgeting, planning, and looking at the operational side versus the capital.
Questions for Noah?
Thank you.
All right,
All right,
thank you.
Thank you, Noah. On to item 6 now, which is a public hearing to update the city's fee resolution. Mr. Bond, this is you.
Yes, thank you. This is an item that has previously been reviewed by the City Council at its June work-study meeting as well as at the July Finance Committee meeting. And the recommendation from the Finance Committee was to take this forward tonight for a public hearing to see if there was testimony from any of our stakeholder groups that deal with permits on a regular basis. And so the draft fee resolution that we're holding a hearing on tonight includes a number of revisions, including, for starters, it's adopting the most recent building valuation table from the International Code Council. I provided in the staff report an explanation of what that means on a dollar basis, but essentially your building permit fee is based on the valuation of the structure that you propose to build, and then you plug that valuation into a table that spits out the actual permit cost. In addition to updating the valuation table, Table 1 in the fee resolution is the table to calculate building permit fees, and what we learned when we presented this in June was that we were the lowest cost permit in the county, significantly lower than Paulsbo, Bainbridge Island, Kitsap County, or Gig Harbor, and some of the Thurston County jurisdictions. We were especially low when it came to large projects of the multi-million-dollar type. And the issue with that is that with one building inspector, we would have to hire a consultant to perform building inspection services for a large project rather than doing that in-house, because it would take all of our inspectors' time. For instance, if we had a courthouse project or a school project, that's likely a multi-million or a multi-year construction project with having a consultant inspector on staff is probably going to be in the $300,000 range to get that sort of plan review and inspection support. And our fees simply weren't enough to cover the city's cost of hiring that consultant to do that work. So we came up with a hybrid approach to the building permit calculation. We adopted the same fee schedule that Paulsbo uses for everything up to $1 million, and then once you're at $1 million, we actually go to Gig Harbors, which is a slightly higher schedule because it's those big complex projects that we would need consultant support on, and that would generate a little bit more revenue to help pay for that. Additionally, the fee resolution clarifies refund policies related to the technology fee. It adopts fees for mailing large plan sets and permit approval packages, and addresses the rounding of calculations and valuations throughout the resolution. And there's a handful of small cleanup type items, but those are the substantive revisions. So with that said, I'm not sure if anyone's here for testimony on this item tonight, but we certainly notified the public of this and sent a special email to the Home Builders Association to see if they had feedback on this.
Okay, with that, I will open the public hearing on the city's new updated fee resolution. Is anyone wishing to testify on this matter? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. So we're not expected to take action on this. I believe this comes back at the next council meeting. Is that correct?
It'll come back at the second meeting in September. I will likely not be at the September 11th meeting.
Okay, fair enough. So it'll come back in a month. With that, we're on to our business items. Item 7A, adoption of an ordinance adding a new chapter 3.81, equipment rental and revolving fund to the Port Orchard Municipal Code. Finance Director Crocker.
Thank you, Mayor. Council members. RCW 35-21088 requires every city having a population of more than 8,000 to establish an equipment rental fund in its street department or any other department of its government. At the June 12th study session, we provide the City Council with information regarding the current state of the city fleet, the creation of an equipment rental revolving fund and its financial impact to the city, as well as the policy and procedures governing the management of the equipment rental revolving fund. We later came back at July 18th study session and presented the City Council with a draft policies of the equipment rental revolving fund and ordinance for review and comments. The City Council has determined that it is in the best interest of the city to amend Title III of the Port Orchard Municipal Code to set forth the requirements of an equipment rental revolving fund and to adopt appropriate policies and procedures. Staff recommend approving the ordinance as provided and establish the equipment rental revolving fund for the city.
Okay, Councilmember Lucarelli.
I move to adopt ordinance number XX0-18 is what we have. Establishing a new chapter 3.81 to be added to the City of Port Orchard Municipal Code, creating an equipment rental and revolving fund.
Second.
So you'll have a proper ordinance number for that? Okay. It won't be XX0. All right. So a motion and a second on the creation of the equipment rental and revolving fund. Is there further discussion? Yes, Councilmember Ashby?
Yeah, my question is pretty easy. Right now, we're just establishing the accounts and we will be taking action later to move money into them.
Yeah, so this ordinance establishes the creation of the funds, and a part of that is to identify some of the other funds that can move cash into it. We will not be doing that at this time, but later on tonight, we also have an adoption of the policies governing the funds as well. And then at a future council meeting, I'll probably bring forward a budget amendment to actually move the cash from the various funds into the equipment rental revolving fund as a first seed. And then as we move into the 2019-2020 budget, we'll again talk about what funds would be needed to fund the ER&R.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Hearing none, you'll be voting on the adoption of an ordinance adding a new chapter, 3.81, Equipment Rental and Revolving Fund. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We are to item 7B, adoption of an ordinance approving a memorandum of understanding with the Port Orchard Police Guild relating to a change in the dental and vision benefits. Ms. Howard is here for us for this tonight.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. The two existing collective bargaining agreements between the City of Port Orchard and the Police Guild, representing the police officers and the police sergeants' bargaining units, which are in effect between January 1st, 2016 and December 31st, 2018, provide that Guild members shall continue to be covered for dental and vision under the Teamsters Health and Welfare Trust through the end of 2018. However, the Teamsters Health and Welfare Trust no longer offers dental and vision coverage as of July 1st, 2018 to Guild members, since they are no longer members of the Teamsters Local 589. Accordingly, the city and the Guild agreed to reopen negotiations on the sole issue of health insurance to bargain over suitable alternative dental and vision insurance plans. The city has secured alternative dental and vision insurance from the Association of Washington Cities to cover the Guild members for dental insurance under Delta Dental Plan J and vision insurance under VSP Zero Deductible. The Guild has agreed to accept both dental and vision plans and enroll the Guild members for 2018 only. The Guild has signed a memorandum of agreement that documents the Guild's agreement with the city to move the Guild members to these dental and vision insurance plans. This MOU, which was executed on July 16, 2018, is attached to a proposed ordinance to approve the MOU. Staff recommends that the City Council adopt the ordinance as presented to approve the proposed MOU and authorize the mayor to sign thereon.
Councilmember Trichardi.
Mayor, I move to adopt an ordinance approving the memorandum of understanding between the city and the police guild relating to a change in dental and vision insurance coverage and authorizing the mayor's signature thereon as presented.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Rosa Pepe. Any questions or comments?
One quick question. Under fiscal impact, it says that this is consistent with the collective bargaining agreements, but will there be, is it the exact same price or not noted there?
There was a slight increase with the Delta Dental. I
Yeah,
believe.
there was a slight
was-
increase, but it was de minimis, I would say.
Yeah.
Again, we were trying to honor our responsibilities for dental vision. The medical expenses of those two services were not very high, so we were trying to, again, honor our agreements with the PD.
Perfect.
Other questions? Okay. You'll be voting on an ordinance approving a memorandum of understanding with the Port Orchard Police Guild relating to changes in dental and vision benefits. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We are to 7C, adoption of an ordinance allowing past resolutions, motions, and discussions adjusting certain wages, hours, and conditions of employment. Ms. Howard?
This is Noah.
Do you want me to do it, Deb? No, I can do it. Okay.
Mine says. Ms. Howard? Okay.
Chapter 35A, 34 RCW, biennial budgets contains a provision relating to the adjustment of wages, hours, and conditions of employment for appointed employees. RCW 34.180 requires that the legislative body make such adjustments by ordinance. City staff recently reviewed its adoption procedures for adjustments to wages, hours, and conditions of employment and discovered the city has a past practice of using resolutions, motions, and discussions to make such adjustments. The city desires to be compliant with all requirements of state and local law. The city recognizes the intent of the council remains unchanged, and this ordinance will correct the adoption process of adjustments of wages, hours, and conditions of employment for the current 2017 to 2018 biennial period. Staff recommends approving the ordinance as presented.
Councilmember Diener?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt an ordinance which will make the city compliant with the applicable adoption procedures for adjustments to wages, hours, and conditions of employment for appointed employees. Furthermore, council recognizes this ordinance does not change the intent, action, or effectiveness of the identified resolutions, motions, and discussions.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Ashby. Was this one of those Code City things that snuck up on us?
No, I think
Or is
it's
this
just
something
one of
we-
these past practices where, you just got in the habit of doing something, and somehow we came across this and said, hey, when we do these types of things, adjustments, it really need to be done by an ordinance rather than resolution. So there's nothing wrong with what we did, and that's why we want to, again, acknowledge that this isn't changing the intent of the council, of what they've already opined on and took votes on. This is just merely a process that we're trying to clean up for the 17-18 biennial period, and then going forward, we will always present these as an ordinance.
Fair enough. Other questions? Okay, so it's really just some cleanup. So you'll be voting on the adoption of an ordinance acknowledging past resolutions and motions and discussion adjusting certain wages, hours, and conditions of employment. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Is there any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We are to 7D, adoption of an ordinance amending Port Orchard Municipal Code 5.98.080 related to special events. Clerk Reinerson.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. So the city collects fees for events that need off-duty officers to help traffic control at certain intersections. Collecting the fees before the event is an administratively burdensome process for many departments, as the cost is just an estimate. The actual number of officers and hours varies for each event. Staff recommends amending Port Orchard Municipal Code Section 5.94.080, City Assistance, to allow for the Finance Department to collect the fee once the actual cost is known, which will occur after the event. Again, staff recommends adoption of the ordinance amending Port Orchard Municipal Code Section 5.94.080, City Assistance, as presented.
Councilmember Riccabote.
I move to adopt an ordinance amending Port Orchard Municipal Code, Section 5.94.080, City Assistance as presented.
Second.
Councilmember Lucarelli, second the motion. Any discussion of this item? Councilmember Chang?
Brandy, I was wondering if you knew the history of the ordinance, because I don't have a problem with it as presented, but I'm wondering if perhaps it was aimed at the new organizations who had never had an event with the city, that we wanted to make sure that they paid before their event instead of afterwards.
Actually, it was based on an event that we've had for a few years that it became problem collecting the fee after the event. And so we had changed it to before the event, but now it becomes more cumbersome to do that. So staff was directed to change it to have it collected after the event.
Councilmember Kuchardi?
Yeah, I was, kind of had the same type of concern there. Is there a way we could put in some sort of a deposit that at least gets us fairly close to what the projections would be, just so we don't have that event where an event is done and then it's non-collectible?
That was part of the conversation, but again, you're still having that accounting, deposit, withdrawal, refund problem. I can say that it only happened for one organization, couple events in a row. We believe that has been resolved as there's new ownership of that event. So I think all the other events, we haven't had any issues. It was just the one, and we believe that that's going to resolve itself as of now.
Councilmember Diener?
So I had thought about the same thing. What if we kept the actual projected expense and then subsequently invoice or refund, as the case may be? But if we don't want to look at that, that's fine. Is it worthwhile thinking about a policy whereby if somebody is in default, that they don't get to be considered for subsequent events?
That would be a council decision that we can amend the ordinance to state.
You could also, it may be problematic, but you could do like we do with right-of-way permits. We could make our franchise agreements, all the organizations just have to have some sort of a bond or surety account, and if they don't pay it, then we take it out of that account.
Mr. Dorsey, who doesn't have to manage those accounts, though, is offering up that solution.
Well, we manage the right-of-way fund.
Chief might have an opinion here.
Yeah, I wasn't real happy when they changed it in the first place. I didn't know about it. We only had one event that it was problematic in getting payment, and payment was always eventually received. And so my opinion is we were managing at the lowest common denominator and penalizing everybody else, including me, because I have to figure out, okay, how many officers are needed for this event, and I'm projecting how many hours it's going to be, and that always changes. Then I have to go work with Patty Saltzgaver, and she's pulling her hair out, and it works well when we do the events with people that we know, which we're doing, and they're all paying, and they're paying what we're billing them. We just had this one event that was a little late several times, but that's been resolved, and it's easier for me, it's easier for the accounting people, and it's easier for the people that are doing these events to get a bill later on. And it's just not been a problem. And it's better that we go, okay, we made a mistake in changing this. We didn't realize the repercussions that this could have. And people are paying, and we're billing, and I think it's going to work fine. That's my opinion.
What is the average cost for this service?
Well, every
I know it varies.
officer gets paid at an overtime rate for working off-duty jobs, and the minimum amount of time is about 3 hours. So for most events, it's not that much because I use police officers for where I'm required to by law, which usually is a road closure of the highway. A road closure that's not the highway, I can use other people. I can use volunteers. I use, court people or some of my parking people. That's why you see them out on some of these events. But at the actual road closure of the highway, you got to have a police officer. And so you're looking at if you're closing Bay Street, you're looking at a minimum of 6 hours of overtime for an officer for the officer's time. That's what it costs.
Councilman Brashear?
Well, I have a question. I'm directing it to Brandy. I believe that police officers' time is an LTAC eligible expense. And I know that in the past, the city has put in a request. And I'm wondering if we put in a request again, if perhaps we could eliminate some of this because there would be LTAC money used which would support the event.
Yes, we can. The application process just closed Monday, but absolutely, I can put in application on behalf of the city and present it to the committee for just police officers. And I think in the past, we've included Public Works, but I think you're just referencing police department, correct?
Well, right now, do they pay us for Public Works also, or just the police
No,
department?
just police.
I was just trying to reduce the expense to the event sponsors, and, and maybe that would be, if the committee feels that way, a good use of LTAC dollars. And then it eliminates all of your not paying or needing deposits and that sort of stuff.
I would not support that.
Okay.
Just for, I just think we need to use those LTAC dollars wisely and reinvest them so we can get a return on that, and making sure we're driving, people into our hotels, and I think that should be a cost borne by the event.
Chief?
Most of these events are not paying for the officers. It's already been grandfathered in, and the ones that are paying for the officers are raising money for runs. They can well pay for the officers' time, and in fact, the Jingle Bell Run, which is, I think, run well and is for a good cause. I go out and direct traffic for free. My deputy chief directs traffic for free. Use a couple parking people, and the cost of them is so minimal that it's ridiculous. So there really isn't anybody that's really bearing a big brunt of costs unless they're trying to raise funds for something.
Mayor, may I sorry, thank you. The language that you see being striked here, to me, reads as really, I hate to use this, but cleanup. It's a process improvement type change. Again, we struck the word projected because there's no such thing as an actual projected expense. It's either an actual expense or it's a projected expense. So when I see that, I think when staff read that, said, well, what does this actually mean? I said, that doesn't work right. We got to strike that. You got to either mean one or the other. And the other piece is really just a process improvement. Why should we do a projection, as the chief said, that we know is going to be wrong? You're going to touch this once, get money, reconcile it, come back and touch it again for very few dollars. So again, process improvement. Those that are participating do end up paying. We only had minor problems with collections. So collections isn't the problem. It's really the process and how many staff do you need to really touch this one specific activity.
And just for clarification, it's $300 to $600, I think, is what the average event-ish. I mean, you may have the bigger ones that are $1,000, but typically the one that we're speaking to, I think, was $300 to $500 that we were collecting on. So,
But-
like I said, I believe it's been resolved.
I think it's also worthwhile noticing, though, that we're proposing to double the rate of the officers, right? So that'll double in some cases,
Right.
or come close.
There's no value in taking a number where, say, $300. We know it's not going to be less than that, so it doesn't create administrative burden, just so they've got, almost like a security deposit down, just so there's some skin in the game, or is that, I don't know.
We're still handling
We're
paper
still
twice.
handling it twice.
This
Finance
is, an-
department.
to a certain degree, this is a no-brainer, because we want to cut down on administrative burdens.
Yeah, and I think if we were concerned truly about collections, then you would say yes.
Right.
Maybe there's some merit in having a deposit down. But since we have a good collection history, minus the one outlier, I wouldn't say it's worth having 5 staff members trying to reconcile for $300, for $600, when we have to spend around trying to figure out
I'm
where that was.
glad we had the
Councilmember
discussion.
Diener threw something out there. I mean, if you want to throw in here, if you've got an outstanding debt, you can't have your event next year. I mean,
For sure.
And we've done that. We've told them in the past, you haven't paid, we can't, approve your future event, and that's the reason why they paid. But, so we do use that.
so it sounds like administratively we're doing that anyway.
The water gets shut off.
I just wonder what the interest rate is.
Councilmember Chang?
I support this. The only reservation that I have, and it sounds like it's minor, I don't know if the council feels the same, was have we thought of treating a first-time event differently than an established event?
We do. There's 3 or 4 grandfathered events. The cruise,
Yeah, I mean a brand new one that's never been done before from an organization we've never heard of.
the only difference is those grandfathers, the Chimes and Lights, the cruise, there's 2, at least one other, maybe 2.
The parade.
The parade, Fathoms Parade.
Probably 4th of July.
Yeah, that's Fathoms, yeah.
Can you explain to me what grandfathered means?
They were these historical events
Yeah.
before we start charging for this that we didn't,
So we don't charge moving forward?
we haven't historically charged those events. And so when we started charging, it was going forward, we're gonna charge everybody, but the council chose to grandfather these.
Is that allowable? That's not a
Okay.
public gifting of funds?
So there's like 6 events a year that we don't require them to pay to have off-duty officers at their event per the resolution. And then we have, I believe, 4 events now that pay for off-duty officers, and I believe all of them are runs, I believe.
Is that allowable?
So Jingle Bell Run, Seagull Splat Run, Yukon Do It Marathon Run.
Obviously, at the council at that time perceived some sort of public benefit to having chimes and lights downtown. Right, that's the only way we could justify it.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're above board and doing things right.
It's a good question.
You have the authority to change that, but I believe that was the thought process at the time.
And we can certainly look into it. I mean, if you'd like us to actually follow up on that and make sure that everything is above board.
It's just a gray area to me too, that we're treating events differently.
Yeah.
I don't think, that doesn't feel right. I
And
think we should treat
presumably, they
everyone
all
the same.
offer the same public benefit in terms
Right. I mean,
of bringing
it just
people in.
doesn't pass the sniff test. I think we should treat all of our events the same.
Okay. Well, we'll look into it and we'll report back what we learn.
To the next Economic Development Committee and have them take a look at it in September and then provide a recommendation to work study for the
there we go.
council.
Which is separate from this.
Which is separate from this issue.
Yes.
Yep, you're right. So, all right. No more questions on this topic? All right. Be voting on an adoption of an ordinance amending Port Orchard Municipal Code 5.94.080 related to special events. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We're on to 7E, adoption of a resolution adopting an equipment rental and revolving fund policy, fleet standardization policy, and a small attractive assets policy. Mr. Crocker.
Thank you. It is a best practice to have written and adopted policies for the management of city operations. These policies have benefits such as assisting our elected officials and staff in the financial management of the city's operations, saving time and energy in the discussion of financial matters, engendering the public confidence, and providing continuity over time as elected officials and staff change. June 12th study session, the Finance Department provided the City Council with information regarding the current state of the fleet, the creation of the Equipment Rental Revolving Fund, and its financial impact to the city, as well as the policies and procedures governing the management of the Equipment Rental Revolving Fund. At the July 17th study session, Finance provided the City Council with drafted Equipment Rental Revolving Fund policies, fleet standardization policy, and small unattractive assets policies. At these study sessions, these policies were discussed and comments were provided with feedback, were discussed in comments and feedback requested. These comments have been incorporated into the final policies. City staff have worked to develop written policies for managing the Equipment Rental Revolving Fund, standardizing the city fleet, and identifying small unattractive assets. The Equipment Rental Revolving Fund policies establish the criteria for maintaining and operating the ENRR fund, as well as the replacement process of the equipment and fleet vehicles. The fleet standardization policies establish standard criteria for the city fleet vehicles, including model, size, color, and schemes. A standardized fleet brings continuity and savings and efficiencies in the operations and management of the fleet. Lastly, the small and attractive assets policy establishes various thresholds for equipment and assets to be classified and managed. Staff recommend approving the resolution adopting the Equipment Rental Revolving Fund policy, the Fleet Standardization policy, and the Small and Attractive Assets policy.
It looks like we're missing the ordinance number on this one, too. Looking at the right. No, I'm at 7A, never mind. In the wrong place.
Sorry, I change out the ordinance, I assign ordinance numbers after it's been adopted, and so I try and go catch it to take that out and put a ordinance. You're adopting a ordinance.
Okay.
And then it's assigned afterwards.
Okay, this one is
No,
missing.
I didn't catch that. I apologize.
Councilmember Ashby.
I move to adopt a ordinance.
Or a resolution, I'm sorry. This
A
one's a
res- I
resolution.
move
Same
to
thing.
adopt a resolution adopting the equipment rental and revolving fund policy, the fleet standardization policy, and the small and attractive assets policy.
Second.
Member Diener, second. Question?
One,
Yeah.
on Exhibit A with the vehicle replacement criteria, just seems to me that expected service life of like small cars and trucks, medium trucks, and really the one that really jumps out to me, the police line cars. Are we really forecasting to replace those vehicles only every 11 years for a police line car?
So again, the vehicle replacement criteria has multiple metrics to it. One is time, one is miles, and one is if there have been significant major repairs. So it is possible, again, that a vehicle could be an older aged vehicle with low mileage. So again, that's why we have multiple criteria
Either
for us to
could trigger it.
fully understand, yes,
Okay.
the vehicle. Now, if it has 130,000 miles in year one, all of a sudden that's on our radar to be replaced. If it has significant repairs in years 1 and 2, it's on our radar to be replaced.
Great.
But if it's operating at a reasonable level and it has a long life, we're happy for that.
Perfect. I just wanted to make sure we weren't creating a policy that pigeonholes us and we need to keep this police line car for 11 years.
I think we might have some that old.
I think I'd be more concerned if we got 130,000 miles in 1 year on a car.
Great, thank you for that answer.
Other questions or comments?
This is good.
It is. You'd be voting on the adoption of a resolution adopting the rental and revolving, is that what we're on here? Yeah, rental and revolving policy, fleet standardization policy, and small attractive assets policy. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We're now to F, 7F, adoption of a resolution repealing resolution number 034-11 and establishing a new reimbursement rate for hiring off-duty officers. Chief Martai.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. This was brought to my attention by the Finance Department a couple weeks ago. They had been running some numbers on the actual cost to the city for having police officers work for private entities. And the way this works is they charge, they've been charging $55 an hour to the organizer per hour of officer time. However, the officers were being paid at their overtime rate through the city, which is the way it should be handled. But unfortunately, since 2011, salaries have changed, and the city is at a considerable disadvantage now, paying or subsidizing some of these organizers. The actual cost that is pretty verifiable for an off-duty officer is just short of $100 an hour, but that's an average salary of an officer and average benefits. All the officers are a little bit different, and their overtime rates are a little bit different, but kind of the average in there is almost $100 an hour. And once again, we're still not taking into consideration gas, the automobile that is used, I think, on every off-duty job that the officers do at this time. So we're still under, but it's just to make us somewhat reasonable in receipts back for the service that we're providing. I'd like to see a resolution changing the off-duty rate charged to private entities raised to $100 an hour so that the city is at least somewhere in the ballpark of what it's costing us.
Councilmember Chang.
I move to adopt a resolution repealing resolution number 03411 and approve to change the amount charged for the hiring of off-duty police officers from $55 an hour to $100 an hour.
Second.
Second, Councilmember Kuchardi.
I'm wondering if we need this resolution at all, or if it should be entirely repealed. If you think about what we just voted on a few minutes ago, it is specific to getting reimbursed at the actual expenses of the city. And now we're going back here to an estimate. And so they're really conflicting one another. I mean, if we're going to be receiving the actual expenses, then I think this is, it's in conflict with the other language and probably unnecessary at this point, if we're looking to be reimbursed for actual costs.
Are those events the only times that officers are contracted out?
No, there's actually quite a bit of off-duty jobs. There's a real mortuary that hires officers for funerals, processions. There's the construction zones have been hiring officers lately to stand out there and work traffic. There is the school hires officers for the football games. There's quite a bit of off-duty that's out there, and it's ongoing. And yeah, I mean,
Sounds like there's
a
two
lot.
different things. There's the special events, which was the other ordinance.
This is any off-duty hiring of a police officer, which would include special events and would include traffic direction, working football games, funeral processions, and there are other miscellaneous items that the officers are hired for.
But, so shouldn't all of the language in all those different areas just say reimbursement of actual expenses?
Well, you know, like I said, it's not my job to do all the figuring on how much it's cost, but every officer is different because of time on the department, whether or not they have a family that they're getting benefits for, or whether they're single and it's less benefits. So every single officer has a different rate that they're being paid at overtime.
Right.
So if you're going to take every job and then take every officer and then try to figure out, okay, we need to charge this much for this guy and this much for that guy, to me, it's not my job, but it sounds like a lot of work. And I think that if you looked at the mean of the group, that's the way it's been done in the past. I think any department I know of.
think
And that's sensible, but I just think that this is now conflicting what we just voted on.
I don't think, what we did before was, I believe, is we were estimating the number of hours. We were charging $55 an hour for everybody else. But the event comes in and says, we need 5 hours of off-duty officers for their event. And so chief estimated, yeah, it's 5 or it's 6 hours. And then the event happened and it was 10. Okay, regardless if it was, now we're charging the difference, or we were refunding the difference, but it was always at $55 an hour.
Understand?
So now so now the other action was, now we're not gonna worry about estimating how many hours we need. We're gonna
We're going to
we're
bill
gonna have
the
the
actual
event, and
amount.
we're gonna bill the appropriate number of hours, and
Right.
instead of at $55 an hour, it's gonna be $100 an hour for those off-duty hours. Does that make sense?
No, it does. I'm just wondering if we just don't have liability there when we say the actual expense. What if the actual expense, because you have a senior member of the
I
team?
don't think
that-
we're saying, I don't know. that
No, we are.
Other ordinance.
The other one did?
Yeah.
Isn't it, my interpretation is the actual expense at $100 an
Now,
hour?
yeah, what the rate is, and
Yeah.
if I could jump in.
Yes.
So for our business, we have drivers at different rates, like you have police officers at different rates. So every year, we set the rate based on what we, any wage increase, benefits increase, et cetera. My only comment on this would be that this be looked at on a yearly basis as opposed to waiting for several years. And I don't think that needs to be put in the resolution at all, but I would hope that we would do that yearly. But we balance it out by setting a rate of what we think it's going to be, regardless whether you have a senior driver for us or a substitute driver. That's the rate, and we look at it every
So
year.
could we tie the two together and reference this rate schedule in the other, you know what I mean, just so they're tied together where someone isn't, wait a minute, someone wants to do the math and they're overcharged or undercharged, and it just, the actual expense of the $100 per hour as defined by this ordinance?
Councilmember Ashby?
Well, I'm just going to say something that may or may not answer your question, but part of the reason that we did the original ordinance and changed it to actual expenses was to simplify it, and to simplify the administration. By saying what our hourly rate is, makes it easier for anyone who chooses. So I think we're hung up on the word actual. And, what that word should be, I don't know. But to
I don't
me,
see a conflict.
you don't see a conflict, right? It's just, they worked 7 hours and 45 minutes at $100 an hour. Yeah.
I think one of the things you can run into too is, if I was gonna hire some off-duty officers, I think I'd call and say, I want the youngest guys you got that are single, that don't have these huge benefits, and I'm gonna pay, $79 an hour, whereas opposed if I hire the old guy that's been around for 25 years and has a big family and lots of benefits and paying $120 an hour. So, I mean, if you want to be upfront and that's.
No, I totally agree with what this is doing, and it simplifies everything. I'm trying to close a loophole on the other side if someone would try to raise a claim that they're being over under. So if we just simply referenced this rate schedule, then it's done.
It's
$100 an hour.
it is problematic though when we start referencing a different ordinance in an ordinance, because you gotta change this ordinance and it's linked to something else and you don't wanna have those connections.
There is,
Yeah, I was just going to support what the mayor said, is that sometimes you don't want to have them so tied because of those things, and then you have to undo everything. But I support exactly what you're saying, Sean, because I think these do complement each other well, and I think now that we've kind of talked this out, we've kind of talked ourselves into understanding how these two work together, and that the actual cost is $100 as defined by the program, as defined by the chief and finance department. That is the actual cost for simplicity reasons to execute the program. So I think we're safe in saying actual because it's defined how we defined it in this resolution.
Okay. Yeah, I want to keep it simple.
Yeah.
within the special event ordinance itself, the one that we just amended, states it in there that if they are to hire an off-duty officer, they have to pay the rate defined by a resolution set by the council. So that's somewhere different in it. So it kind of ties it back, but it doesn't tie it to the rate, if that helps.
Yeah, I want to keep it simple, that's for sure. I love what this is accomplishing.
Okay. Other questions or concerns?
No, is $100 enough? We're still below. I mean, we're still not being.
I don't think anybody would be able to say that they're paying too much, and I'd be able to articulate why it's costing the city actually more. But, when you start getting into costs of gas, police officer vehicle time, depreciation on the car, but when you have a car out there blocking traffic and that car's running because you're running your emergency lights, that's costly.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and perhaps what we can do is, taking on Jay's suggestion, is make this a review with each new biennial budget. As we adjust contracts, let's review kind of how this was established.
Just to follow on that thread, do we have a time of year when we look at our fees all together collectively so that our fee schedule is reviewed in one shot?
No.
I'm gonna say no. It sounds really good. I think about all different fees.
We tumble upon them, it's like this.
Yeah, like
and,
this. Sure.
There's not enough hours in the day.
Right.
I'm being honest. And, Nick, we had a couple of big projects being talked about, and fortunately Nick looked at it and said, wow, if one of these projects came in for a permit today, we'd be subsidizing it. So it's usually those aha moments. Is how they happen. Yeah. Councilmember Lucarelli.
Partly, I see this service too as literally a service to the community. I mean, partly when you have special events and such, this is all for safety, and it's to allow these kind of events to happen. And when we've been on ED tourism, that's part of what goes with promoting the community. So there's a balance here, and I like what you're doing by raising the rate to be a little closer to what it is, but I also see that as the city providing something for the community in general, as long as there's a balance and we don't go too crazy in one direction. I'm happy with this.
Any more questions or comments? Okay, you'll be voting on adoption of a resolution repealing resolution number 34-11 and establishing a new reimbursement rate for hiring off-duty officers. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Just 7G, authorization for the finance director to pay the city claims. So since we're having our business meeting on the work study night, not having a meeting next week, we still need to be able to pay bills next week. So with that, Mr. Crocker.
Yep, thank you, Mayor. Again, the City Council will not be meeting in the 4th week of August. The City of Port Orchard has an obligation to keep current on its liabilities. City Council should authorize the Finance Director to pay city claims and provide claims register to the City Council at the first meeting in September. Furthermore, the Finance Department will work with the Finance Committee to develop an expenditure, control, and disbursement policy consistent with RCW 4224, which addresses timing and internal controls. Again, what I'm proposing here is that we work with the Finance Committee to address a long-term solution to internal controls, an expenditure and internal control policy. And I think that makes a lot of sense. It's another best practice thing that we can continue to move forward with. And in the interim, adopt this motion to allow me to release payments for our vendors.
Councilmember Lucarelli.
I authorize the finance director to pay city claims and provide claims register to city council at the first meeting in September.
Second.
Councilmember Diener, any questions or comments? Okay, be voting on authorization for the finance director to pay the claims. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We're to 7H, which is a discussion of the West Sound Utility or the Kitsap Water Reclamation Facility plant manager position. Mr. Dorsey, you participated in an interview panel, and evidently at the last SAC meeting, they weren't able to take action on this item. So you want to talk about that interview process that you participated in? And then I think it'd be the desire to have the council affirm that hiring so that West Sound can move forward, because I don't think SAC meets but quarterly.
Right.
And they need to get this person hired.
So I guess, first off, I don't believe that the city actually was required to participate. We volunteered to serve on that panel because now that there's been a change in management, we wanted to extend an olive branch, so to speak. So I dedicated an entire day in reviewing applications and then going through the interview process. And so it was a very robust process. And there was definitely a singular standout during the process. The West End Utility District manager provided no foresight into the applicants, although he had, in working in the industry and doing some background checking, after we had already discussed each applicant, he was able to provide some then background that just kind of confirmed, like what I was thinking or what everybody else is thinking. So I think the process was sound, and there was definitely a singular person that stood above the rest. And that's the one that we're, as a committee or a panel chose to move forward with. I know that I had sent an email out expressing that process, and unfortunately I don't think everybody saw it in time for the SAC meeting. So I think it's very important because this individual is actually have three, counting the South Kitsap Water Reclamation Facility, actually had 1, 2, 3 other offers. He's highly sought after. So I believe that West Sound was able to do some sort of interim measure so that he didn't go interview in Kennewick, but I think it's very important that the council move forward with this recommendation. And then, I was there as, an appointed official on behalf of the city to take part in that process. And again, I don't think we were actually required to do so, but I did. So I feel very good about the decision, and hopefully we haven't delayed anything and things can move forward.
Do we know if we were going to take action here? Do you know the name of the individual so that we could, is that?
Marty Grable.
Okay,
Marty?
so,
Yeah,
It's Marty Grable.
yeah, Marty Grable, that's the one.
okay. It didn't make it into the staff report, so Councilmember Lucarelli?
I think we want to just make it clear, committee members, that when we went to the meeting, we had on the agenda, all it is SKRWF, plant manager position. That's all it had on the agenda. So we didn't really know that we were going to be approving or anything. There were no other materials presented. And so all we said was, how can we put our stamp of approval on somebody that we don't know anything about at all? We didn't understand how involved you were in the process, and we had a general idea, but we just didn't feel comfortable saying yes to something that we didn't have any information on. So we asked for information, and we got it. And of course, looking at the resume and everything, we were very impressed. But it was just that we, at that time, said, and I'm speaking for myself now, is that I didn't feel comfortable giving an approval on something I knew absolutely nothing about. That's all. And we said I said I would abstain. They could go ahead and vote, but I just didn't want to say yes until I knew more information, that's all.
I agree with what Cindy said. Mark, it was nothing that you did or didn't do. Your email was read. Oddly enough, your email doesn't have the name either. So it was just interesting that we have this agenda item that Cindy said, it doesn't have a name. They say Marty Grable. We said, well, usually when we do something similar, which is a mayoral confirmation, we get an individual's name, we get a staff report, we get a background on them. So what happened is the meeting stopped. Randy went and printed the guy's application and resume, and we looked at it and we thought, we don't have an issue with that. It's just that what's on the agenda is like, you're expecting us to say yes, we don't know the name of the person, and I think they were just missing that last bit of communication on maybe they're not used to having confirmations. But I'm certainly comfortable with the individual that you selected. We just didn't anywhere in any of the correspondence know, did they, the name?
Well, I think it was, again, this is a West End Utility District process. It doesn't require didn't require our involvement at all.
We were happy to abstain and let the 3 commissioners vote on it. We figured with 5 of us there, they would have had a majority.
And they could have done that, but I think, again, in this kind of olive branch wound healing period, they didn't want to do that.
And that's fine. Yeah. We didn't want to hold up anything, and we found out that we could still do this and it would be fine.
I think there is a difference, a difference of a committee appointment versus a personnel. When you put this individual's name on an agenda and he has a job somewhere, that isn't, so a personnel matter is different than a appointment to the planning commission or something in that where you're volunteering. So a person's information needs to be protected to a certain degree, because if he doesn't take the job or you don't hire him, he can get himself in trouble with his employer. So this is a little different animal, but anyway, it's water under the bridge, and we're here tonight, and I think they'd like to get this person hired and not wait till the next SAC meeting. So
what do we need to do? Why do we have to?
Per our operating agreement with them, we need to affirm the hiring of this person.
A resolution? Or just an affirmation?
Just a motion.
A motion to affirm the hiring of Marty Grable as the plant manager for the South Kitsap Water Reclamation Plant.
Someone on the committee, I think. Yeah. Fred, you want to go ahead?
Sure. I move that we confirm the hiring of Marty Grable. It's Grabill.
Yes.
As the new South Kitsap Water Reclamation Facility Plant Manager.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of that affirmation, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Wonderful. All right. We're on to.
Can we ask that he come and meet with us? Or
I'm certain he will. Randy
Okay.
always came with Michael for their annual presentation at the end of the year in the budget process. So I'm certain this person will come, and the SAC members will definitely see him at their next meeting. So, all right. Finance Committee hasn't met. They haven't set a meeting date, and Mr. Clausen's not here. I know there's nothing really burning there other than establishing the meeting dates for the budget process is probably gonna be part of your next agenda. But
Is there a time of September that works best for you with all the data that you need to have?
If we can try to target early September, that would be good for a lot of reasons. Gives us
Like
time
early?
to kind of prepare.
Could we just try to throw a date out there? Like, I know last couple times we've met before the council meeting.
I won't be in town. Councilmember Diener's running that meeting, but on the 11th anyhow.
You'll be gone on the 11th?
I'll be gone on the 11th, yeah.
Okay.
So I can follow up after the meeting and send out some emails to kind of coordinate a
Okay,
date that
great.
works.
Perfect.
And we're to economic development tourism,
Yeah, we have not met since the last meeting. We'll be meeting
September 10th.
September 10th, yes.
Okay. Utilities, looks like you're meeting September 17th. I don't know that you've met since then either.
No,
Yep.
we
Yep.
haven't.
Okay. And Sewer Advisory Committee did meet.
And we're meeting October 10th.
Okay. October 10th, Brandy, if you want to.
And we're meeting here at City Hall, actually.
Land use has not met.
We have a date.
Hasn't met. We are scheduled to meet on the 24th of September at 9:30 at DCD.
And lodging tax, have you established your first meeting?
We haven't set our first meeting yet, but I will look at Brandy and said, do we have a date?
So we're still trying to finalize that we have some committee members that aren't meshing with the schedule. So it looks like it's gonna, their first meeting is hoping to be September 19th or 20th. So that's their goal.
So she's coordinating, so.
Okay,
we're good.
Brandy's coordinating the meeting. More to come. Festivals of Chimes and Lights, sounds like you're
Yes.
the only one meeting.
Yes, we did. We met and working on the details of the tree decorating contest and how we're getting the word out there and also looking at our budget and working with advertising. So just a little reminder that it might not be a bad idea for the council to have a tree and the mayor also.
All right, how are your tree sales going?
So far, about 10 to 15 commitments. I don't think that many have paid, though.
You remind me, how many total?
58.
58.
I would just put it out to council, are you interested in a tree? I'm glad to financially support it, but I have no creativity at all. And so,
So long as you don't get, as long as you don't mind being beaten by the Diener family tree.
Oh.
Throw that out there. Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
Okay, the Diener family tree.
Whoa. And it would be under $10. It wouldn't be that much, that expensive. It's a $50 charge. We could split it. I'll volunteer to decorate. Fred and I will do this.
Done.
All blue.
Beck's writing a check, Sean's writing a check, and Fred and Cindy are decorating.
I'll pay cash.
I got sweat equity.
All right. Sounds like we've handled that. Outside agencies, I filled in for Beck at the executive board at KRCC today. And you probably got an email today or saved the date for the legislative reception. The date even moved today because
December 3rd.
it's not December 3rd now because the county commissioners have a budget hearing that night, and that came out today. It's going to be that week, though, we believe. I think the 6th. And you'll get
Is
it.
that
It's a
Thursday?
Thursday. Yeah, because Thursday is the only night. County meets Monday, we meet Tuesday, other cities meet Wednesday, and nobody meets on a Thursday. So probably get an invite for December 6th.
We don't meet the first week.
And yeah, we don't meet the first week, that's right. And we were brainstorming on how to bring Bremerton back into the mix at the agency and maybe changing some of the voting. That was continued to a future meeting. We were discussing the work plan. The other outside agencies that I sit on all had the month of August off, so we have our next Super Tuesday on the first week in September. So we're to the mayor's report, I believe. Yes, and a couple things. If you haven't driven the Tremont lately, it looks very different, and the paving looks great, I think, and it's a vast improvement.
Traffic's moving.
Traffic is moving through it. There's still work to be done there, so it won't always move during the day, but it's a much better situation. I talked to you about possibly live streaming council meetings. We have a technology problem related to that. So when we tried, we've got some video equipment for this pier. We thought it would seem simple that we would put it on our web page. Our Wi-Fi, though, goes through Wave system, and that's what we have to utilize for this. It's nowhere near, it's a residential capacity, and we can't.
That's all they gave us?
That's all we get, yes. So, the county pipeline, because of security requirements, we can't put that video through there, and so it isn't possible for us to, without having our own fiber network, which we partner with the county on that and through their IT department. We have a very modest IT department of one half-time employee. So it's not without a significant financial investment in IT, it's not possible. So Kitty Hall was at City Hall today. Last year, we adopted 4 kittens on Kitty Hall Day. Today, 17 kittens arrived and 15 went home.
Wow.
So
Goodness.
big success. And
How many did Debbie take?
Debbie, did you take 10?
I tried to get 2, but my husband said, wait till you retire. That's what the answer was. I called him.
we had an employee picnic last Friday over at Clayton Park, and Deb coordinated our own farmers markets. Everybody brought produce and the things they'd made from home. Deb generated $280. Was that the number from the employees farmers market that we donated to the Humane Society today as part of the event? So,
Very cool.
so hats off to Deb.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I just notified this week too, October 4th is the AW, Association of Washington Cities regional meeting. I'm the regional board representative now, and we will be the host city for the regional event. I don't know yet where that will be take place at, but it will be on October 4th. So mark your calendar. We'd like to have a nice showing from the city of Port Orchard. I put a.
What time is that?
Probably 5:45 is what they're, till 8 o'clock in the evening. That's what they gave me. This drawing, we're looking for ways to save some money on some projects because we've had some change orders. So this isn't the best depiction, but this plaza the entry plaza at McCormick Village Park is a 50-foot circle. And we were under Mark and Mike and I were under the impression that the concrete was stamped with those leaves. It's not. It's a smooth concrete surface with a stain. And we're concerned about the long-term maintenance of that stain and how long that basically paint would last on there. And I have some concerns that we are inadvertently creating a phenomenal skate park with this very smooth concrete and a 50-foot circle for people to race around in on their skateboards. So we're asking the contractor, I don't have an answer yet, but will be solved before the next council meeting, potentially putting exposed aggregate concrete so it's not so smooth and so desirable to run around for a skate park, informal skate park. So I just wanted some thoughts if anybody had any can't do that reaction.
Put some boulders in there too.
Yeah, it's supposed to be the entry plaza.
No,
but
I know,
yeah.
I was joking.
But
So is that a parks planning kind of recommendation to stifle borders? Just to use that
well,
kind of
it wasn't
surface?
intended to be a skate park.
Right.
This entry plaza.
Right,
So that might be my concern is that that's what it'll turn into.
yeah.
And I don't believe that was the intent of it.
Yeah, the washed aggregate takes care of a lot of issues. The non-stamped concrete, I mean, staining that, it's gonna bleed, number one. Number two is we're gonna have to go out there twice a year and seal it, which is gonna be problematic. And then you've got the unintended consequences. So it just seems that having a smooth trowel finished surface with this stained imprint, isn't really something that's viable moving forward over time.
That could be really slick too. You get a little bit of moss on there, mildew.
It doesn't
and-
take much. I mean, the washed aggregate will as well. I mean, we got to maintain it, but trying to go out there with this stain that's going to wear off, and the leaves are going to move over time, because if they were embossed, I thought they were embossed, like some sort of a stamp. That would be different,
Like a depression in the concrete is what we envisioned.
because then you could
But
literally
that-
go
that isn't what it
pour
is.
the stain in, and it would kind of soak in. But trying to take a template and each year doing that, I think an aggregate concrete finish is going to be much better.
So just didn't want to make a change and then you guys go, well, what happened to my leaves? So, and we're not positive yet that the contractor's willing to make that accommodation, but we're looking at all of our projects and how, how can we keep them within budget? And this is one
But
of the ideas.
would that be less expensive to do the
We,
aggregate concrete?
We were looking for the cost of the leaves, and while they're in the specs, we don't see them in the bid documents. So initially, we were looking just to remove the leaves and how much it would save us. We don't believe there's any savings because they're not in the bids. So this is going to be a negotiation with the contractor that, this should have been in the bid, and it's not. And how would you feel about doing aggregate, which is probably less labor intensive for you? So I think it's going to be a win-win for both sides.
I'm okay with that.
So, okay, and then next time you're downtown, by tomorrow, I think the rest of them will be out. 4 of the new garbage cans were put out today downtown. So they've got a garbage and a recycle all in one tote. They look very nice. So some pictures through the smog or smoke were sent to me. Tough to find them, but I did see them. So go downtown when the weather clears.
Library one.
They're on, in the same locations the existing garbage cans are, and then we have 8 garbage cans, so there's 8 new ones. It's all we could afford. I wanted more. Probably ask for more in the next budget process. So the 8 existing cans are being replaced. We're gonna take the 4 nicest cans and put them mid-block downtown, because they're at the street corners right now. And then we're gonna take the 4 that are beat up the worst and send them out and have them sandblasted and repowder coated, and then deploy them at parks is the plan. Because they're nicer than what we have in our parks. With that, we are to department heads. Mr. Dorsey.
Yeah, a couple quick things. The SR16 corridor study is wrapping up. At this point, we know the City of Port Orchard's path forward, I think, is fairly clear. We have 2 projects, at least on the list. They're not the projects that we want, but they're identified that we could attack legislatively. I think a decision that the city needs to make is whether or not we want to participate or suggest that the West Sound Alliance, a revised version of the West Sound Alliance, like a South End West Sound Alliance, is reinitiated. That involves the Navy.
That's probably not what we want to talk about here tonight. Beck and I have been talking about that offline, so about the West Sound Alliance. So.
But I think.
What were the 2 projects?
Rather than, excuse me just a second, I think, rather than doing using that name, West Sound Alliance, I think we just do the Highway 16 corridor group, like they have a 305 corridor group.
Okay.
And that would, involve Gig Harbor, probably the military, us.
Port, Bremerton.
The port in the county, yeah.
In the county.
And transit, yeah.
Basically not the North End folks. I mean, I'm just saying that we,
Correct.
Yeah.
at some point, we have to decide if we want to do that or take our 2
And
projects and
it's
run
part
it.
of our lobbying effort.
Yeah.
So it's on the lobbying agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah, for ours. The question is whether or not we
Right.
want to participate in this, basically help the Gorst issue.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And we have the same lobbyist as Gig Harbor does.
Okay. The second thing is
I think they're the 2 roundabouts.
It's the Tremont interchange.
Oh, okay.
The other issue is there will be a non-working day shutdown, at least for this week on Tremont. Fingers crossed that this crane operators strike that initiated in Seattle, because the crane operators also include machine operators are the same union, and so they're wanting more money, and so these other union members are now affecting construction projects, road construction projects. So we have for the rest of this week, there'll be no equipment operating, which
I
means.
wondered why it was quiet up there.
Yeah, as of 6 a.m. this morning. So the good news is we're not having to pay days. They're non-working days per the spec. But at some point, the main focus of this year was to get that wearing course asphalt down. And at this point, we got the section up through South Kitsap Boulevard, but the remaining portion, we got to get the curbs poured, and the curb machine operators are part of this union. So even though we have all the string lines out and ready to pour more curb, we're shut down. So I'm just hoping that this comes to a quick resolution. If it doesn't, it could become a problem.
Wow.
Was that for the crane operators to get more money or the union at large?
It was, when I looked online, it was a union. It came out of the Seattle Teamsters, but it was the crane operators, and then in parentheses it said surveyors, construction equipment operators, blah blah blah. But it's the prime initiant. That's not even a word. I just made it. I'm like George Bush.
I like that word.
The initiant. I like
Urban
that.
Dictionary.
The primary initiant is perpetrator. Were the crane operators. Apparently, Seattle has the most cranes up in the United States. They have 47 cranes currently up, and they make between $37 to $49 an hour, and they want 15% increase. And so we're just getting sucked up into this much larger conversation. So again, fingers crossed that they come to resolution. They're obviously doing like teachers do, like where they pick it, the day school starts. They've hit the peak. So you've got all these WashDOT contracts and all this Western Washington highway construction that's just stopped right now. So the impact again on us is us getting that asphalt down.
How does that work with liquidated damages then?
Well,
Or
they're
does it not?
non-working days, so we'll
Non-working
continue
days,
to
right.
we'll continue to issue non-working days, but at some point it's just going to affect our critical path.
Oh, well, and it'll affect, if we don't get the wearing course down, we'll end up with an expense for erosion control this winter that we didn't anticipate, because we were supposed to have the site all buttoned up by the end of September.
Right. I mean, at least we're lucky this didn't happen 2 weeks ago, because at least we got from 16 to South Kitsap Boulevard. That would have been really bad, because we're going to keep Tremont closed from South Kitsap up anyway, but we still have a lot of work to do. Got some water lines still, and we got some work between Pottery and Port Orchard Boulevard to do, which needs, pulverizing, and so yeah, it's.
Was Pottery going to open this fall, the roundabout there, or?
No.
No, okay.
No, you're going to be running on the current traffic control almost to the end of the project.
Right. One question, I think you were talking about it before the beginning, before the meeting started, and that was the stop sign and yield signs, because they're both there, and I heard you say that the yield signs were going away, and I do have a very strong concern that we're going to see some possible issues there, because people are already treating it as the yield signs are hard to see, but people are already going into the roundabout, treating it as a roundabout.
Right. Well, at the last meeting last week, the city requested that it operate as a roundabout once it was paved with the yield signs. So when I got the email from Travis Baker, I actually responded and said, there's no stop signs up there, because our request was make it an operating roundabout. So then I drove through it, and there and behold, there were not only a yield sign, but a stop sign. Mm-hmm. So then I emailed him today and I said, look, you've got conflicting information. You need to deal with this. You need to take the stop signs down. And then the response I got back was, we're taking the yield signs down. So you need to understand that per contract, that is their project site. It's their traffic control. Their traffic control designer is responsible and liable. So we can't direct. It's right. Methods and means. So all we can do is strongly suggest, and I've already done that. When I went through, it was operating just as a roundabout. People were just ignoring both the stop and the yield sign. They were just operating as a roundabout. But I understand the issue with if somebody gets rear-ended, if somebody gets hit, if somebody gets a ticket, then it gets very confusing. So we at least have to take the dual
Right.
information out, and then I'll continue to talk to ACI to have them consider bagging the stop signs and putting the yield signs back up.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Crocker?
Nothing for me, thank you.
Mr. Bond?
Yes, Councilmember Ashby, you had asked for an update on the transportation implementation strategy between the city and the county for South Kitsap. We had our kickoff meeting in May, and the next step in this process was to have our engineer do work for the county, and it's taken the county a long time to get that interlocal agreement written. They sent us a draft in early July, and then it had to be totally redone by their attorney because we pointed out that this didn't make sense for that particular effort, and so now we can actually get this thing moving again. So we're a little behind schedule, but I think we can actually get started on the actual work now. The other two announcements I had tonight, the mayor had asked me to bring this up with the council at the retreat in the spring. We talked about updating our traffic impact fee study. We also talked about updating the city park plan before the end of the year. The reason to do the impact fee study was that our current impact fee study says that we should do it every 3 years, and it's coming up on 3 years at the end of this year, though if it rolls into early next year, it's probably not a huge deal. And we were also sort of waiting to see the Tremont study, or I'm sorry, the Bethel study, to see what the cost estimates were, and we have those now to where I think we can proceed with that project if we want to before the end of the year. But now that we have some capital projects that are in the red a little bit, we wanted to see if council still wanted to initiate that prior to the end of the year or wait for the budget. Likewise, the parks plan update, I think that one we have to have a plan done by next spring in order to apply for the next round of RCO grants. We don't really have a project in mind, and so my thought is that one is certainly, if we wanted to wait until the next budget cycle, that would be fine, but I wanted feedback from council on those two items.
I don't think from a staff standpoint anyway, if somebody gave us a bunch of park money, I don't think we could perform. I think we've got to concentrate on the projects we have and not be concerned about going out and getting new opportunities, even though it'd be nice to have more new roads and parks. So I don't think it's detrimental to wait until next budget process, because that park study is going to be expensive. It's the public outreach part. It's going to, and it's general fund dollars.
It seems to me your department was going to do that outreach, was that correct?
We were going to do the parks plan, but not the impact fee analysis and the capital portion of it.
Okay.
But I think, it's going to be costly, but I don't think it's probably in the $40,000 to $60,000 range for a parks plan update. The traffic impact fee study is probably closer to 10,000, maybe 15,000 tops to fully update that, and maybe even less. But until I actually solicit a scope and fee, I don't know for sure.
Okay. Do you want us to, on that traffic piece, can that wait? And do you want till next year? Or do you guys wanting to get that?
2018. Just working into the budget for next year.
I know you're drowning. I know that.
I'm full of all kinds of bad news today, so I would say we can't take on anything else right now.
Okay.
We need to manage what we have, and we're struggling to manage that right now. That's just the reality.
And I agree with that sentiment.
Okay.
So we'll punt them both into the next budget process, but I think those are both priorities that we want to see.
Particularly that traffic impact fee, that is of interest to me.
Yeah, on that one, I think I would probably have a scope and fee ready to go so that we could approve a contract the first meeting of the new year.
Yeah, right away in January. We can implement that at any point, can't we?
Yes, we can.
It doesn't have to be part of the comprehensive plan process or anything of that nature, does it?
No, it's purely updating the ordinance, the adopting ordinance for our impact fees.
Okay. Sounds good. Sharon?
Nothing for me tonight, thank you.
Deb, you're here. Any more personnel matters?
We have an applicant that's going through the background process for our part-time parking enforcement officer. So we have an opening there that we have, we interviewed and we have someone, but they have to go through the background process, and the police department is doing that. And then we are still down an officer, so we are going to set up an oral board, probably, oral board interviews probably in the next, by the 1st of the September, we'll be holding those so we can get another officers on board.
Down a public works person too.
Oh,
We have
that's
an
right.
opening,
And
too.
then we have it advertised for another public works employee that we had one resign, so. And we're still looking for that engineer.
Still looking for an engineer too? Yep. You have a- Okay, you did or you're going to?
We're going.
Okay, thank you. So we have one applicant that we're gonna do a phone interview. Skype, he's in Eastern Washington. So, Randy?
I have nothing.
Okay, with that, or citizen comments. Jerry, nothing? All right.